Hey sports fans, I've got a new show on SBNation Radio. That's right, a national terrestrial radio show every Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern. So tune in on your local FM station or stream it live from SBNationRadio.com. I'll also post the show right here as a podcast the next day. You in?
It's the B-Ball Breakdown with Coach Nick on SB Nation Radio.
And online at SBNationLive.com.
Coming to you live from the O'Reilly Auto Parts Studios, here's Coach Nick.
What is up, sports fans? It is Coach Nick, and welcome to another edition of the B-Ball Breakdown. Happy to be here on a Tuesday, and some really good games on TNT tonight. Looking forward to that. We have one actually starting right now over in Boston, and then you can be sure I will be glued to the set to watch the Rockets take on the Blazers, and we'll be on Twitter doing all sorts of live tweeting of that game. So stay tuned for that coming up later tonight. But if you haven't missed it, I am Coach Nick. This is B-Ball Breakdown, or the B-Ball Breakdown, and over on my YouTube channel where I create a lot of videos that break down the game itself. I just did one on Wiggins, and Andrew Wiggins being unhappy potentially in Minnesota. There were some reports coming out that he might not really like where he's at right now, particularly because with Jimmy Butler out, he's getting tons and tons of ISOs and post-ups. And I'm sure he's sensing that Jimmy Butler will come back sooner than later, and he will lose a lot of that opportunity, and that's a frustration for him. So I go over exactly how that works and why that might be a problem, even though they signed him to a max contract and have him for a while. So we'll have to see how that plays out. So stay tuned for that. And then also, I also did a video yesterday on the massive upset of Virginia by UMBC. And it was a really exciting game. I got a chance to watch the whole second half live, and I did a breakdown of that. And basically, I kind of eviscerated Tony Bennett's whole philosophy on of way he plays basketball, which is really kind of stupid because the guy has been dominant for years now in Virginia. But I got to tell you that there's some, distinctly non-modern aspects to the way he runs his offense and his defense that, I don't know, it just feels to me like it's going to eventually catch up to him, and they're going to have to adjust and change, or else, suffer more losses like that against undermanned teams, even though you could argue his team was undermanned to some degree as well. So we have a great show coming up tonight. Can't wait to bring on Sean Highkin. We're going to talk a little bit about the Blazers and their surprise third-place seeding at the moment right now, kind of firmly ensconced in third place. And then we also have Adam Stanco, friend of the Breakdown, coming on to talk a little bit more about that Virginia game and some other NCAA basketball. And Steve Kyler, the man behind the plan, Basketball Insider. So don't go anywhere. No flipping. I'm Coach Nick, and this is the Basketball Breakdown.
It's the B-Ball Breakdown with Coach Nick on SB Nation Radio. Coming to you live from the O'Reilly Auto Parts Studios, here's Coach Nick.
Hey, everybody. I am back. Welcome to the B-Ball Breakdown. As always, I am Coach Nick, if you're just joining us, and I run the B-Ball Breakdown over on YouTube and Twitter and everywhere else on the social media network. And I'm really excited to get this show going. We have another great guest to talk about the Portland Trailblazers in a minute, and certainly they are the surprise team, I think, of the season this far, firmly in that third spot. And I think I need to wrap my head around what's going on here, because we might even have like a very dark horse MVP candidate. Certainly it's sort of like Harden and then everybody else. So with that in mind, let's bring on Sean Highkin, who is an NBA writer for Bleacher Report and other outlets. And we're here to talk some Blazers. So Sean, thanks for coming on the show tonight.
How you doing, buddy? It's been a while.
It's been way too long. Glad to hear your voice. And I thought you can let's break into this, man. Let's not waste any time. Like, what is the key here to what the Blazers have been doing all year to get so high in that standings?
Well, I mean, if you want to talk about what the biggest difference is, and I think maybe this is just because, like, they're buying in more to, Terry Stotts, or just the personnel has more time together, and, they have a whole year with Nurkic and all that kind of stuff. But the defense is much, much improved from where it was last year. If you look at the last 2 years with basically this same, core group, post LaMarcus Aldridge, where the team is built around Dave and CJ, and you've got these other role players. 2015-16, they were 20th in the league in defense. or no, they were 21st that year. And last year they were 21st. Now they're 8th. And so I think just the defense, on top of that, the offense, being what it is with Dame and CJ, both guys who can, score 30 on you on any given night. And then they have these, they have these role players who know their role, like Al-Farouq Aminu, Evan Turner, as much as people, like to pile on him because of his contract. He's been good in his role for them this year. Nurkic has been solid. Zach Collins, the rookie out of Gonzaga, has been making an impact lately. It's just a solid, deep team that everybody on the team knows their role and they are well coached. And, I think they're really clicking this year.
So what about Evan Turner? Because I'm not even concerned about the contract. I just feel like whenever I watch a Portland Trailblazers game, like he's the guy, like if you're in a pickup game and he gets next, you're just like, or like he picks you up or you're on his team. Can you help me put my finger on exactly what it is, or maybe convince me that I shouldn't be so frustrated, but there's something about him and I can't quite put my finger on it. What do you think?
Well, he's not a very aesthetically pleasing guy to watch, so I kind of get it, but he actually works well with the second unit. He can work as a secondary ball handler if they want to play Dame or CJ off the ball. He's a guy that you can put in a variety of different roles. He's got size, so he can guard different positions. I think he's just kind of grown into what they envisioned his role being when they signed him to that contract.
Fair enough. Okay, yeah. I mean, I guess, part of it is he likes to over-dribble a little bit. Maybe his shot isn't so – it certainly isn't pleasing. And I just feel like sometimes, like, they get stuff going and then all of a sudden the ball's moving, it's exciting, and then it just stops. But let's move on to Damian Lillard because certainly I would argue he might have the best argument for, next in line behind Harden for MVP.
Well, he'll get some votes for sure. With the caveat, obviously, that James Harden is going to win MVP. James Harden should win MVP. Like when you say that any of these guys are in the MVP conversation, we mean that they're in the conversation for second, third, fourth, fifth place because James Harden is going to win the MVP. But out of anybody else in the league, you look at a guy like him, you look at Anthony Davis. I think those are the next two in line. With what Dame has been doing, with how he's just been carrying them. He's having a career year in terms of his individual numbers, but also carrying them down the stretch. He's had a lot of clutch performances, and then obviously this winning streak has, I think that's really helped his case. But he's been as impressive as anybody in the league outside of James Harden.
So, and also, is he the same kind of guy in the clutch? I know there was a 2 or 3 years ago where he was just insane down the stretch and hitting shots. And are we still seeing that kind of performance from him going down the clutch, down the stretch in these games recently?
We've seen it at times this year. A lot of times, during this winning streak, they haven't really had to do that because they've been beating teams. These games haven't really been close. The only game that they won by fewer than 5 points was the game against Phoenix during this winning streak, and that game, he did kind of take over and roll them back into that game. But other than that, they've just kind of been beating teams pretty handily, so you haven't really had to see a lot of clutch situations for him to be heroic in.
For sure, and it's what's weird is that it seems like every team this year gets a 10-game winning streak minimum, right? I think I counted the other day it was something like 6 or 7 teams. Has to be unprecedented, and certainly what the Blazers are doing right now is fantastic for them. We don't have that many games left, which is kind of frightening to me. Are they going to hang on and hold on to that third spot and get a first round home series?
I think they have enough cushion at this point that they should be able to, barring a disaster. But the schedule's going to be pretty tough. They've got Houston tonight. That starts in a couple hours. They've got the Celtics coming up. They've got the Clippers coming up. They just beat the Clippers the other night. They've got another game against the Spurs. They have another game against the Rockets later on. They've got Utah. They've got kind of all these Western Conference teams that are sort of in the mix with them. And so, those are going to be some pretty hard-fought games. So, they're not going to be able to take any nights off. But, seeing how well they're playing right now, how handily they've been beating these good teams during this winning streak, I think there's no reason to believe they can't keep it going for another couple of weeks. I don't know about not losing a single game in that time. I don't think they're going to end the season on a 24-game winning streak. But, I don't think they're going to go into a total tailspin and somehow lose the position that they're in right now.
I believe so. They have a 2-game lead right now, and that's a pretty good, solid hold on that. Although the way the Western Conference is shaping up, it's insane. It's crazy. Who knows what could happen? And heck, they could go into a spin, right, and end up 6th or 7th the way this is going to happen. So we'll have to see. Now, here's the other problem. I also have a problem with Aminu. Yeah, I like the team. I like watching the team, but Aminu, the way he shoots his jump shot, and I know he's probably is he still over 40% from 3 this year? It's a good question.
If he's not, he's close.
Okay, so which again is shocking, and part of the reason is because they just leave him completely open, right? They want him to shoot it, but What frustrates me about him, I think, is ball handling and the shooting and sort of the overall offensive skill issue. And that's when Zach Collins comes in. I think that he has a shot. Obviously not this year, but am I crazy to be as high on him as I am right now?
He's been solid. He comes in. He looks like he could kind of be that stretch five. He's shown an ability to hit a mid-range shot, hit a three-pointer at times. He needs to bulk up a little bit, but I think he's going to do that. But I think he's a guy that I think has potential in a couple of years to be a starter at center in the NBA. I don't know about right now, obviously, because he's a rookie, but he's been solid since he started getting minutes.
Sure. And, he actually already looks bigger to me now than he did even, when he finished college, right? I mean, you've seen him day to day. Had you noticed that, he's already getting stronger?
I think you're kind of starting to see the process. He's not quite where he needs to be yet. You want to see him out a little bit more, but he's definitely moving in the right direction.
Okay, good. Well, we have a question over in the Periscope that someone asked about Dame having a legit beef with CP3, and I kind of miss it. I guess maybe did someone score at the end of the game and someone got really upset. Do you know what that's about?
Vaguely. I think Chris Paul took a shot at the end of a game when the Rockets had it in hand and Dame saw it as disrespectful. I don't really ever like to get caught up in that stuff. I don't think that's really out of all the beefs that NBA players have gotten into with each other this year. I think this kind of pales in comparison to Rockets players trying to go into the Clippers locker room or J.R. Smith throwing a bowl of soup. I'm not really too worked up about Damian Lillard being mad at Chris Paul taking a shot at the end of a game in November or whatever.
Fair enough. Now, by the way, that is an interesting question because these are men. This is the NBA, yet there still seems to be some sort of Boy Scout code about certain things like that. I know, in theory, if it was baseball, they would have beaned him, I guess, the next at bat, right? So, what do you think about that? Are those legit gripes to even think about? Because we've seen it before, where a guy shoots a three when at the buzzer when they're not guarding him. Should that be an issue?
I mean, I'm not really huge on unwritten rules or anything like that, but. These are prideful guys. They're going to be. You saw what kind of happened with the Lakers and the Nuggets a couple of weeks ago with Jamal Murray and some of the Lakers players saying he was being disrespectful, and they played them again the next day. Obviously, whatever this thing with Dame and CP was all the way back in November or December, so I don't think that's really going to be that fresh in their mind, or I don't think that's really going to affect the outcome of the game too much. But whenever there's an excuse to add more drama to these kind of big time matchups on TNT tonight, so it's a national game, there's going to be a lot of eyes on it. If that's what Dame needs to ramp up the intensity, yeah.
All right. Well, listen, you just ramped my intensity up for this whole interview, so I can't thank you enough for doing that and bringing me coming on the show and breaking that down for us. So, really quickly, what are you writing on right now?
I've got a few different things I'm working on that are going to be coming out in the next few weeks. I probably can't talk about them yet, but I got some stuff coming. Just follow me on Twitter at Highkin, Highkin. Whatever I'm writing, you'll see it on there.
There you go. Great shout out before I could get it out for you. But Sean, thanks for coming on the show so much. I really appreciate it. Great stuff, and we will catch up to you down the line.
Always good to talk to you, Nick.
Thanks. Well, that was Sean Highkin, and that, again, is at Highkin. I don't know how he got that Twitter handle. It's a really great one, just his last name. And make sure to check him out on Twitter and all the stuff that's happening over on the Blazers. And plus, he does all the NBA. He's a really great stuff. He's been a writer for a long time around these parts, and always great to talk to him. And coming up in our next segment, we have Adam Stanco, who is the best friend of the Breakdown, and he'll be doing a lot of great stuff talking about college hoops and the NBA draft and what happened for Virginia. So, you don't want to miss that. And then in our final segment after that, we have Steve Kyler. Actually, not our final. I have one more after that. But we have Steve Kyler coming up, the man behind Basketball Insiders. So lots to do, lots to talk about. Can't wait to get to it. And if you want to check out what's going on in the game right now, do it. But make sure you come right back to the show, and I will catch up to you. I'm Coach Nick, and this is the B-Ball Breakdown. I wanted to take a quick break to talk to you about Simple Contacts, a convenient way to reorder your contact lenses that will save you money. When my wife runs out of her contacts, it's normally a nightmare to renew her prescription, and sometimes she's forced to wear her old ones for days until she finds the time to go out and pick them up. With Simple Contacts, they bring the doctor to you. You can take a vision test at home in under 5 minutes, then a real doctor reviews your test and writes you a new prescription. This isn't a replacement for your periodic full eye health exam, but it's the next best thing. Simple Contacts offers every brand of lenses, and their prices are unbeatable, and shipping is free. But my listeners also get $30 off their first Simple Contacts order with code COACHNICK. To save $30 on your lenses, just go to simplecontacts.com/CoachNick or enter the code CoachNick at checkout. Again, that's simplecontacts.com/CoachNick or just enter my code at the checkout.
It's the B-Ball Breakdown with Coach Nick on SBNation Radio. Coming to you live from the O'Reilly Auto Parts Studios, here's Coach Nick.
What's up, sports fans? It's Coach Nick of the B-Ball Breakdown. The show is the B-Ball Breakdown. I'm glad to be here with you guys. Shout out to the first, when we came back from the first break, we had Stone Temple Pilots playing, which was definitely a big shout out for me, a good choice. And let's get into our NBA discussion a little bit. We're going to have a really good guest to talk about. Actually, today we're going to talk a little bit about the college stuff that's going on for this segment, because I'm curious to hear his thoughts on what happened with the Virginia game and the UMBC, the biggest upset of all time, of which I did a video on. So, without any further delay, let's bring on Adam Stanco, friend of the Breakdown, TV producer, college hoops, and NBA draft insider, and man about town. Adam, are you there?
I'm here, Coach. Do you get some free auto parts in that new studio of yours?
You know, I do, but since I drive an electric car, they just sit there in my garage. It's like a sculpture.
I love it.
I kind of want to just produce a show like in the garage, like in literally with a car jacked up behind me. That'd be great.
I could see you being talented with a mechanic.
I wish. Well, enough of this wrenches talk, and let's get into some basketball. Did you happen to see the Virginia UMBC game on Friday?
I did see it, and in fact, I was actually watching on a streaming service delayed about 2 minutes. My brother was at the game. I had to tell him at some point to finally stop texting me because he was giving it all away.
Wow.
It's always the worst when that happens. But it was pretty remarkable. I mean, you're talking about, Virginia shoots 1 of 9 from 3 in the first half, scores tied at 21 at halftime. And, Virginia sort of played their same style they played throughout the year. They defensively were going to grind you out, limit the amount of possessions, take their time on offense. And Ryan Odom, Dave Odom's son, the late Dave Odom's son, made a great coaching decision in the second half. He came out and decided that they were going to play loose. They were going to speed up Virginia, and really what was interesting was just to watch sort of the Virginia offense unravel as guys sort of got nervous, and we saw a lot of missed shots. We saw a lot of selfish play. We saw one-on-one basketball, and that's not what Virginia was all about. And then they give up 53 points in the second half. They were averaging giving up 53 points for the game throughout the year. One of the best defensive teams we had seen. They had the best defensive efficiency rating since the Kentucky team that went 38-1 a couple of years ago. So this was an excellent defensive team, which really struggled against dribble penetration, and offensively they became rattled. And truth be told, I think that's a big difference between NBA play and college play, is that in this NCAA tournament, this is a one-and-done mentality, win or go home. The doubt starts to creep in, the nervousness starts to creep in, and the amount of pressure when no number one seed's ever lost just can completely paralyze the team, and I think that's what happened to Virginia in that second half.
Yeah, that sounds right to me. And also, I basically eviscerated Tony Bennett in the video I did on Monday because, I've never liked the offense they run. Like you mentioned, there was they were out of character, certainly the way they ran their offense. But they run it. It's called movers and blockers, and so basically two guys are. Their only job is to set screens, basically. They might catch the ball real quick on a turnaround like a post-up or whatever, and they got to give it right back to the guards. And I just think I'm just so opposed to that kind of offense because I just believe that guys should be allowed to move a little bit more freely and catch the ball and actually look at the basket. And I really feel like that was a big detriment. Also, when you have the two guys who are only screening, they're generally around the basket most of the time. There were no driving lanes.
Yes. You're absolutely right, and I'll tell you something. There's really now this debate that started amongst college basketball people about whether you can win in general if you're not playing loose, you're not playing with more of an up-tempo offense, and with guys having more opportunities to score, whatever your offense is, flex, horns, motion, anything that's more sort of free-flowing, the stuff that you get into, that gets a little bit wonky for fans. But, you also see, I think coaches love to, and we saw this in the NBA years ago, and I think it's gone less this way, but just sort of the amount of control that coaches want sometimes over their program, certainly on the offensive end, where they want to almost control every single possession and limit things, which oftentimes I feel like just from a confidence standpoint can really limit your guys, especially if they start missing shots. What's your thought on that, Coach?
I agree. I feel like I would never want to call a play. I was a triangle offense coach. Like, one of the big reasons I loved it was because I could just sit there and it's just read and react, and they just they play. It's 5-on-5, and they are the ones in control of their destiny. And without a question, even though the shot clock's gone to 30 seconds, which was supposed to sort of limit a little bit of that control, I just don't see why you'd ever want to play that way. Even in a situation where I guess it would dictate that might be the best way to do it, but it's so decidedly old school the way they align themselves. How do they do it? So what I showed on the defensive end too. So they play pack line defense, which I'm not a big fan of either, and they allow a lot of middle penetration. They want people to go middle where supposedly the help is, but that to me just generates a lot of open threes, which we saw UMBC get. So how do they do it? How do they hold teams to 53 points a game or whatever it was during the regular season?
Well, I think mostly, in addition to just playing the straight pack line defense, I think mostly the biggest thing that Virginia does is they're constantly practicing defense. At Virginia practices, that's what their main focus is all the time is on the defensive end. And what they've really done is gotten their kids to just buy in to making sure that they're getting stops on each possession. They also use offense as their defense. I mean, in the college game, there's so many teams that are used to just coming down and taking quick shots early on in the shot clock. Virginia doesn't do that. They drain the clock, limit the amount of possession. So in a way, part of their strength on defense is the fact that they frustrated you so much. We used to see this with Pete Carrill's teams at Princeton, where they take so long to get a shot off. They're draining the shot clock down on every possession. That by the time you get the basketball, it's your natural instinct to say, I got to go hoist this thing up because we got to start putting points on the board. And I think that offense can sort of be one of their best strategies defensively. But also, again, these kids buy in. They grind on every possession. It's total commitment, total buy-in. And that's what made this whole thing so shocking. They were all of a sudden turning to the refs, complaining to the officials. They were going one-on-one on offense. It was very uncharacteristic. And what I found to be so fascinating was that normally Tony Bennett, normally a coach may make adjustments in that situation, but that worked for them all season long. I mean, this team had never trailed by more than 13 points all season. They didn't even know what it felt like, and I think they just went into panic mode, and he tried to play it cool, and, it was sort of one of those Phil Jackson moments of all right, my guys are going to play through it, and they just never could. They could never get over the hump, and UMBC kept hitting shots, and that's it. Curtain.
Yeah. And once they went down by 12 points with about 8 or 9 minutes to go, I think they really sensed that they simply weren't going to score another 12 points for the rest of the game. And so that was really a problem that they, that's why they probably panicked a bit of it. So let's pivot for the last few minutes we have here to talk about Sean Miller, because I'm kind of curious your thoughts. This is maybe even more up your alley. There were some pretty damning reports. He's lost some recruits, but he's fighting it. He's basically saying it's not true what they heard about. Supposedly, there's a tape of him on the phone talking about money and whatnot. What can you break some news for us?
Well, in terms of breaking news, I mean what we know for sure factually is that Arizona's losing their entire starting five. For next season. Alonzo Trier's leaving school. DeAndre Ayton, of course, is leaving school. Parker Jackson Cartwright, Dusan Ristich are graduating. Raleigh Alkins is also entering the draft. So they're losing their entire starting five, and they had some huge commitments. Javon Quinterly, the point guard who's now going to Villanova. You had Shaq's kid who's now going to UCLA. They lost their entire recruiting class, and right now they don't have any commits. So there's no commitments, and you're losing your entire starting five. So things look pretty bleak just from that end. In terms of the other news, I mean, look, the reports came out. There were allegations made by Mark Schlabach of ESPN, and then Sean Miller refuted those allegations. So someone's got a tape somewhere of some evidence, and it may be in FBI headquarters, but it's going to come out eventually, whether it's in court or what have you, and we'll see who's on the right side of history. But as of right now, I mean, Arizona's program is struggling, and it's really hard to see, just on the basketball side of things, what Sean Miller is going to be able to put out on the court, considering you had DeAndre Ayton, who's a once-in-a-generation type player, and you couldn't get out of the first round against the 13-seed Buffalo. So, you know, what are you going to do when next year your team is made up of grad transfers and late commits? It's going to be a difficult season for sure for Arizona.
Well, that's absolutely true. But what was not difficult was having you on the show today to talk about what's going on in the college basketball. So, Adam, I can't thank you enough for joining us. And if you want to find him, and you do, on Twitter, it's at Naismith Lives, as in Dr. James Naismith, Naismith Lives. So definitely give him a follow on Twitter. And I cannot wait to hook up with you again and talk more college. And we'll have to talk about the draft next time, Adam.
Absolutely. I can't wait to listen to the rest of the show. I'm always in, Coach.
Awesome. Well, I'm in too, and I'm Coach Nick, and this is the B-Ball Breakdown.
It's the B-Ball Breakdown with Coach Nick on SBNation Radio. Coming to you live from the O'Reilly Auto Parts Studios, here's Coach Nick.
Hey, sports fans, it is Coach Nick. This is the B-Ball Breakdown. Not break up, breakdown, because that's what we are doing. We are breaking down the NBA. And so we had a great segment there. I basically was able to pour out my heart about why I don't like the way Tony Bennett coaches. But that said, he is probably the best coach in college. He gets the most out of what he has. I just suspect that as going forward and as these teams are shooting. So I think part of the problem with the pack line defense is that they allow it middle and they try and close out. But these teams are now going to start shooting from 2, 3, 4 feet behind the three-point line. And that kind of spacing is going to be really hard to defend when you're playing that way, because the drive into the middle is still, it's still in the same spot, into the key. And then to close out and try and get a hand up that will actually affect a three-point shot is, a real problem that will ultimately, if they don't adjust, they're going to, give up open threes. And then the question is, will they get hot? Certainly, we saw UMBC get hot, but, that's what a D1 team looks like. If you got a couple shooters, I would imagine that most D1 teams have shooters like that. So at least one or two. And so that's an interesting question that he might have to ultimately decide if they want to adjust the way they play defense. Now, offensively, again, same problem, because they have these two guys who are always setting screens. There's nowhere to drive. There's no spacing. Even if you are a less talented offensive team, you need to be able to have that kind of spacing in this day and age, or at least maybe use it to penetrate with a low post pass. So as we try and find Steve Kyler out there in the waves to come on the show, we'll keep talking. Maybe we'll have some questions here. So that was one question we have over at Periscope, which what do you think of Tony Bennett as a coach? So again, I can't stress, his record is unparalleled. It speaks for itself. He's been a winner everywhere he's gone. He's got the pedigree with his father. I mean, I remember when his father, Dick Bennett, was at Milwaukee, UW-Milwaukee, and I was at Wisconsin. We were preparing for them, and remembering we were preparing for the pack line defense, what that meant. And I can tell you, I went to, I worked, hundreds of practices when I was a manager in Wisconsin, and I hardly remember any of them. But one that I do remember is when Stu Jackson, the head coach, we had to prepare for UW-Milwaukee. Definitely a real, I don't know, it's stuck in my mind. So I've never forgotten that. And again, I'm a strict no middle defense guy. So I don't want the offense to get in the middle, because you'll notice even a guy who's not very talented, if you get him to the middle of the floor, he looks like an all-star. So that's what you want to avoid. Well, without any further ado, let's bring on our last guest of the night. And as always, I reserve the last for best, or best for last. Let's bring on Steve Kyler, the man behind Basketball Insiders. Steve, are you there?
I'm with you, Nick. How are you?
I am good. It's good to hear your voice live on the radio. You sound much better when you're live on the radio. Did you know that?
Well, I do have kind of that, tram operator at Disney World kind of vibe going on. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, awesome. Well, and it must be your proximity to Disney World. So we're talking here, we're talking NBA. We have some interesting storylines here. What do you think is going to happen here with this ridiculous Western Conference bottleneck from 3rd to 8th, or from 3rd to 10th, basically?
Well, I think it's interesting because we kind of get caught up in that. But you and I both know that we're talking about a two-horse race in the Western Conference in terms of can we get a healthy Golden State Warriors team and a Houston Rocket team. I think what Portland is doing right now is really impressive, and I think you have to know that the Oklahoma City Thunder were going to find their way. They've got too much talent. But the reality is the next tier of teams is a real big tier down. It's going to be interesting because I think there's some teams that could make things fun for Houston, make things fun for the Golden State Warriors, not only deeper into the playoff picture, but in the first round. Like, I would love to see New Orleans pull the Golden State Warriors in the first round. I think that's a great kind of first-round matchup that's really going to test. And then, more importantly, not allow the Warriors to try to rest players and get healthy. So I think it becomes much more of a contest this year. I think it's always been kind of anticlimactic that it's going to be the Warriors and it's going to be the Cavs. This year, I think you can make a case that it could be any of 3 or 4 teams, and I think that's a good thing. But, I look at it and say still at the end of the day, if I'm a betting man, it's either going to be Houston and Golden State at the Western Conference. The rest of it is just kind of drama in the middle.
That's fair enough. And, the problem with the Pelicans is they might not even make it at this point. The Jazz might not make it. I mean, the Jazz are so hot at this point that I would assume that they're going to, get themselves ensconced. But what do you make of this? Like, the Timberwolves are tied in they're 2 games up of the Clippers and the Nuggets. Now, are the Nuggets dead? Have they gotten the sword stuck in them and pulled out?
Just about. I'm a big fan of the last 10. I think the last 10 games really illustrates who you are, and sure, there's some matchups that play into it. How many road games, how many back-to-back-y type situations are you? The last 10 kind of says you're trending in the right direction. And I look at the Timberwolves, and sure, they may get Jimmy Butler back here next week, and that's certainly a huge boost, but I don't like who they've been in the last 10 games. I don't see a team that matters. If they get in, they're going to get swept. They're not a team that's getting in and challenging. I kind of look at the Pelicans, and I'm almost with you on this. Here's what I look at. The Lakers aren't going to get there. I think the Denver Nuggets aren't going to get there. I think the L.A. Clippers, if there were 10 more games, if we weren't talking about 11, 12 games left in the season, if we were talking about 20 games left in the season, maybe they could make up enough ground to get there, but they're just good enough to be out. So I do think that, the teams we're talking about in terms of San Antonio, Utah, New Orleans, and the Timberwolves are going to get in. But what do they look like when they get there? I don't think the Timberwolves are going to be very formidable. I think the Pelicans are really interesting because of the way Anthony Davis is playing. And you mentioned Utah. I think Utah's the giant killer of all of this because they've got so many things going their way. They play great on both ends of the floor. Donovan Mitchell has been an X factor for them, but they've got guys that are just like sneaky good guys, the Joe Ingles of the world, that just kind of make a lot of really good plays. And, Nick, I think you can appreciate this more than anybody. The difference between a win or loss in the playoffs is 2 or 3 really good plays. And the Jazz really have the makeup of a team that can make those 2 or 3 plays, or maybe you counted them out, or maybe you didn't think about the altitude, or maybe you didn't get a good night's sleep, and they can sneak up on you. And I think they've got the ability to score points. And I think that's the one thing that you look at in terms of you've got to be able to score in the postseason. And I think they can score.
Absolutely, all great points, and I'm definitely looking forward to a Utah Jazz, and I think they're going to get to that 4th, 5th seed, and if either way they can win that first round series, they could beat OKC in the first round series, I think, and then we get maybe the Golden State Warriors against them, and that would be a fantastic matchup, Quinn Snyder versus Steve Kerr, so a lot of intrigue there. But what's even more intrigue, I'm kind of curious on your take, is you're the man we all turn to when we're talking about hot seats for coaches. We have some interesting storylines with that. What do you make of, let's just pick a team here, Milwaukee. What do you hear what's going on there with the next coach?
Milwaukee's going to do a real search. They're going to go out and try to find a real leader for the team. I think Joe Prunty has done an incredible job. Those that know that Joe Prunty is a really good coach, but I don't think that's the right situation for him to really get his first serious head coaching job. That's going to be the interesting one because they've got a lot of things riding on this decision. Think about it. Giannis is on board, but for how much longer? They're going to be a playoff team, but can they really compete this year? If they're not really in the championship hunt, they're going to face the same problem other teams have, which is when does a superstar turn on you? We're kind of starting to see that with New Orleans. There are a lot more talk about Anthony Davis leaving than Anthony Davis staying, and the easiest way to cement that is to get the right head coach. So they're going to do a real search. I really like what they have already on the roster. So that's a really good job.
Mm-hmm.
When you're talking about, the David Tisdales and the guys that really could do something with that roster, I don't think you're going to see a reach-ready type guy. I think you're going to see a younger kind of guy in there, one, because of just how the age of the roster is, but more importantly, I think just where the team wants to be in style of play.
Absolutely. It's a great job. I think they have a lot of great athletes. They just need, someone who can come in there and command the locker room and give them enough of a structure that they could do better. I still don't like the way they run their offense and to help generate offense for Giannis. So they need someone who can come in there. I don't know if that's Fizdale, but certainly his name comes up quite a bit. Any other teams that have, is Thibodeau safe?
Well, Thibodeau's safe. Yeah, I don't think we're talking about Thibodeau, but, we stand Van Gundy safe. I think that's the real question. You're talking about going into year 5 in Detroit. I think Stan's going to see his role change a little bit. I think there's been so much talk about it that if, Tom Gores comes to him and says, Stan, we want to take away power, we want to take away this, unless it comes with a multi-year extension attached to it, I think Stan may take his basketball and go to his porch in Florida. It may be a big change, in Detroit. I think Steve Clifford in Charlotte has to be worried. They're going after a new general manager. That general manager is going to be empowered to remake the team in their image. So that probably means Steve Clifford in Charlotte is out. Again, another great coach that's probably best being a lead assistant, not necessarily so much a head coach. Jeff Hornacek is probably out in New York. That one's pretty safe money. Frank Vogel in Orlando looks like he's out at the end of the season. We'll see what happens with Mike Budenholzer in Atlanta. That one just seems like they're going in very different directions. So it wouldn't surprise me if Mike's out there. Doc Rivers with the LA Clippers. I love what Doc Rivers has done with these new guys, and I think it kind of illustrates that I think Doc's methodology runs out pretty quick. I think new guys relate to Doc really well. Guys that have been in the league don't, so they tend to tune him out a little bit. I'm interested to kind of see what happens in Memphis. They've got an interim coach there. They're going to go coach shopping, and certainly the Phoenix Suns are going to go coach shopping. So there could be 6-7 jobs that I'm talking about you as the next head coach for.
Crazy. I mean, this reminds me, I think we had 4 or 5 years ago where we had, it wasn't like half the coaches turnover, but it was double digits, I think. Am I crazy? Isn't that right?
Yeah, there were double-digit turnovers, and not only that, there were, real winning coaches. Remember, that was the year Lionel Hollins wins Coach of the Year, and he's out. So it's big. But I think the other part, too, is if you look at last year, there were no meaningful coaching changes, no coaching changes in the offseason. So whenever you go from a year of nobody got moved, that you're going to end up with a year like this year where you have 4 or 5 jobs. And I think it's a good, the game is changing. You know this as well as anybody. You talk about it all the time at B-Ball Breakdown, that the game is evolving. It is more of a pace and space game. It is more of high volume, high touches, lots of shot attempts. And that's a very different game. And I think you've seen some of the older coaches struggling with it. Some of the newer coaches, the more inventive coaches, maybe we'll call it the Mike D'Antoni factor, but there is a resurgence of try to get, 100 possession, 115 possession type games where you're really amping up the shot attempts, because I think that's how everybody wants to play.
I agree. And in fact, we mentioned with the Kings that they're 3rd in the league in 3-point percentage, but they don't take any threes. And it just drives me crazy. But I guess that's what tanking looks like for you. But without question, we're moving into...
That's Dave Yeager, who I think is a great coach, but I don't think his methodology lines up. I think when you look at a team that's got 23 wins right now, there's a reason. If they were shooting more threes or they were playing more up-tempo, they're such a slave to the defense-first mindset, and I think you have to be defensive-oriented to win, but you have to really be willing to run and push and shoot because, look, I think Houston has shown you the way. If you can get up 43s a night, you're going to run more teams out of the gym than not because you have teams, more importantly, have players that can make those kinds of threes in volume.
Absolutely. Well, you are the man who can make those plays as well in volume, and I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. It's at Steve Kyler NBA, Basketball Insiders. Thanks so much for coming on. And stay tuned, sports fans, as we come back for our last segment. And this is Coach Nick, and it's also the B-Ball Breakdown.
It's the B-Ball Breakdown with Coach Nick on SBNation Radio. Coming to you live from the O'Reilly Auto Parts Studios, here's Coach Nick.
Hey, sports fans, it is Coach Nick. This is the B-Ball Breakdown, as that awesome voiceover just told you. And another fantastic show in the books. We had some really good guests. I was really happy to have Sean Highkin come on. I hadn't talked to him in a long time. We broke down some of the Blazers and what's going on there. And we had best friend of the breakdown, Adam Stanco, talk me through my issues with Virginia because I still just have these issues with their philosophy. Yet they're just dominant over the last several years. And Tony Bennett has been a dominant coach wherever he's gone. But I just feel like what he's doing now is a little bit old school and a little bit outdated, and eventually it's going to be a problem. And then we had Steve Kyler of the Basketball Insiders coming on to break down the Western Conference playoff race. Plus, the best part of that segment was who was on the hot seat. And it was kind of crazy to look at how many darn coaches out there. If you have a coach in front of your name, you better be careful. I better make sure I don't get fired from my job. So a lot of openings there that will cause seismic shifts across the country because a college coach might jump up to another bench in the NBA, and then all of a sudden the college ranks get messed around. With this FBI investigation is going to most likely cause some serious upheaval amongst the college ranks. So there's going to be some interesting coaches moving around and getting some jobs in this coming up year, and we'll have to see if out of that tumultuous nature or tumultuous period, maybe a coach who gets a shot who probably wouldn't have in the past ends up making his mark on the game of basketball, and will never to be forgotten. So interesting thing to keep your eye on there. We have a great game coming up. I know I'm going to be out there on Twitter watching and tweeting and sharing video clips with the Rockets at the Blazers. A real good chance on TNT for everyone to see how far they've come and whether or not the Blazers are for real. I'm not sure they have to win that game, but they definitely need to be competitive to show us that they have that third seed on lock and that they can be competitive in the playoffs beyond the first round. So really exciting stuff to see as we progress. And then certainly as we move along the rest of that season, it's almost over, folks. So stay tuned over at my YouTube channel, B-Ball Breakdown. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all those different things. And again, every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern, right here, it's the B-Ball Breakdown.